international people coming to you as well and whatnot?
Yeah, cricketer from India. I was doing some vision work with. Um, One of the guys down in Super Rugby Pacific.
Nice.
So it's like it's kind of all over the fucking place, really.
Yeah, that's cool though. You got such a wide range of athletes there. I think it'll be actually interesting for even people like myself. We've been following each other for a while, but I don't know the exact scope of work that you're doing. And there might be other people that will be in the same boat. So run me through it. Give me a breakdown.
Yeah, so I try to remain a bit of a ghost, but lately I've had to do like an online presence, so it's not my favorite thing in the world. But so chiropractor by trade, got into initially worked in strength and conditioning, came up under Justin Kavanaugh. I used to do NFL Combine prep, trained a shit ton of athletes back in the Washington D.C. area, and then he was the 100 and 200 meter coach for a lot of athletes for St. Kitts and St. Nevis for sprinting Summer Olympics. So that was initially my background. And then going from there, all I wanted to do was train athletes. And Cav said he wouldn't hire me back until I got a doctorate in something. And so the initial plan was exercise phys. And then I realized like it's a pretty limited scope with what I'm going to do with that. So then I looked into physical therapy. And at the time, I didn't know you had to apply to a clearinghouse. And then the clearinghouse sent off all your transcripts to the university. And so by the time I sent all that stuff off and they got to the university, I missed the deadline. So I was kind of in no man's land. And I was still playing rugby at the time. And here in the US, there's two schools that will actually give you a scholarship to play rugby, like to go to a chiropractic school. And so I ended up just doing that. I was like, I'll just keep playing rugby then. So then I went to chiro school, never met a chiropractor in my life. And I was like, fuck it, I'll just go do this.
So then now what? So where does that lead you now?
So now like I got my own clinic and then still train athletes, mostly. It's kind of a wide mix, man. Like I just had a guy who I was working with for a while that now he just reported to Mexico. He's playing in the Mexican Baseball League. And then fighters, like I got some young and up and coming guys that I've been working with. And I kind of just randomly fell into working with fighters. It wasn't like on purpose at all. But the clinic that I did my internship at out of school was they sponsored a fighter and he was just fighting in the local promotions. And we went to go watch him fight and he lost. And I'm like, you looked like shit. Like, let me train you. And so that was kind of like my foray back into training a lot of the athletes. And I got him from local scene, worked with him all the way up through Bellator and then PFL. And then he just brought me more of the fighters from that gym. And so now I just kind of work with a lot of fighters out of that gym. And they got some young guys that are kind of up and coming. So I'd have that background of things. And then I just kind of see a lot of crazy cases, I guess, every week, like whether it's the MS stuff or I got an athlete that's like, I got a, partially torn Achilles, but I need to play this weekend. Like, what can I do type thing. So it's like shit hits the fan. I'm usually the person that they come see.
Well, that's a good thing too. So so you're just doing like a mix of like strength conditioning and then, well, I mean, we can call it say like rehab.
Yeah, rehab in a way. Yeah, so it's kind of like a blend between the two. So it's a perfect transition because I think like a lot of times people just get into the issue of they go and they see a physio, chiro, whatever it might be, and like they're good at getting them to the initial stages, but not into like a competitive stage.
Yeah.
Or they might just give them absolute shit advice and it sets them back as well. So I ran into that too, like being an athlete myself. And so I think that was just a really big issue that I wanted to kind of mitigate. And luckily, like I already had a fairly in-depth background in strength conditioning. So I was like, okay, well, I can just take you from like day one post-op to like competing and getting back on the podium. And so it just made it really easy to control all the variables. Yeah. And so people tend to like it more because I don't now have to go to like 3 different people for one thing. Like I can just stick with you. And so that's also what's led to me branching out with so many things that I've learned is that I see so much crazy shit in the clinic. I'm like, okay, God, now I got to go learn a little bit about this. And so like for my hockey guys, like I'd never played hockey. I grew up in an area where it's warm. Like we didn't really get snow. But now I work with like a bunch of guys in the NHL. And so to understand their hip morphology is so drastically different from any other athlete because they naturally have FAI. So femoral acetabular impingement, they get that when they skate. And it's just a natural byproduct of them skating through adolescence. It's how their bones kind of recorrect for the amount of stress that they're putting on it. But that ultimately changes how you train them in the weight room because you can do some serious damage if you don't know what you're doing with it. Same thing with baseball players, like they get humeral head retroversions. So their shoulder like the humerus actually spins backwards, which allows them that like cock back position a lot deeper. And that's why they can get so much velocity on a ball. But that also changes how you train their shoulder because it's not like a gen pop person.
So what would be some examples then of, say, for the hockey player's hips and the baseball player's shoulder? Like, what would be some considerations you look at the gym?
So for baseball players, like we're looking at maintaining a bit of internal rotation strength throughout the year, but also maintaining that external rotation. A lot of it is just training in those cock back, lay back positions. Looking at shoulder blade positioning, because a lot of guys, if they can actually throw pretty hard, like I've worked with some guys like in the Toronto Blue Jays pipeline, and so the guys can throw, like they got some heat behind it. And so when you're touching like upper 90s, low 100s, your shoulder blade will actually start to wrap around like your rib cage. Like it's way off to the side, and that's just a natural adaptation from getting that reach to the glove. But now that predisposes you to lat tears because now your lat is in a like far worse off position to stabilize everything else. And so that's why you'll see lat tears with guys that have insane velo. So now like you have to take that into consideration when you're training them, especially how their shoulder moves and everything else from a stabilization standpoint. As far as hockey, it's just not going, it's kind of a weird thing. I've talked to so many people about this. You have to train internal rotation, but if you train internal rotation too much, you wreck their hip. So it's like a fine balance. Like nobody has a good answer. I've talked to so many strength coaches that work in hockey, and we're all like, I don't know, we're just doing it and hoping it doesn't fuck them up. Because there's not a perfect answer. And like that's the trickiest thing. So it's like really just, having an open dialogue with the athlete, making sure you're doing all the right stuff.
Interesting. So in that baseball example, you're saying you're loading those like extreme externally rotated positions to strengthen? Is that what you're
More so like ISOs from some of those positions? Like we might ISO them from an internal rotation standpoint. Like, so I might load them here, like they're already in the cock back position, and we might just do like sub-maximal like ISOs to train that internal rotator to be acceptable, like to want to accept length in that position. Otherwise, it just gradually tightens up, and then they start to lose motion over the shoulder. And that's a big like predisposition for that injury.
Gotcha. And then for the lats, you mentioned obviously they can be susceptible to injury there just because of the positioning. So what is something that you're trying to address there? Is it just as simple as someone saying just do more pull downs and pull ups?
Yeah, in a way, like just changing the positioning like of where we do the pull down from. Like I might pop their chest up a little bit more to force them to almost pinch their shoulder blade in to try to bring it in more. Because I almost kind of just describe everything as like, if you're all the way out to the edge, there's no more room for that shoulder blade to move. If I bring it back in, then I can keep going back out, if that makes sense. So almost just like not a true joint centration type model, but like you just need to be able to go both ways, which is just normal training, I feel like.
Yeah. So then within the combat athletes you have, do you see any of these kind of things come up, or what do you see typically come up around these regions?
Like your classic, like shoulders, hips, low backs. That usually tends to get a lot of people. Like joint lock positions, or especially like in jiu-jitsu, like depending upon the style that you play, like if you're like a guard puller or getting caught in like side control a lot, like you're trying to shrimp out of things and like keep your posture. And so that requires a lot of it's called the quadratus lumborum. So it attaches from base of pelvis or top of pelvis to bottom of rib cage. And that always gets pissed off with grapplers because you're usually, even if you're like a wrestler, like you're still bent over into that position. So it's constantly being put on strain. So it's something that we have to actively attack and try to strengthen it up. But also we're going to train a shit ton of oblique to then offset that tension, because the oblique, the adductor, both kind of offset the tension from that QL. And that's the same issue we run into with hockey, because when you skate and you push off the ice, you don't actually reach triple extension. You lift like your hip right at the end, which is all QL based work. And so like a lot of hockey players have super tight low backs, coupled in the fact that they have hardly any internal rotation left on their hip. So they're always going to be super tight in their back.
So then what will be some examples then for a jiu-jitsu athlete listening to this to attack some of those areas?
Like one of my favorite things to do is grab heavy med ball, or it could be like one of the strongman bags, and we'll just lie on our back, put the bag on our hip, gable grip around it, and then pull it across from a straight leg position. So I can't like anchor from my legs, and just take it from one side over to the other. Because you're training it in a rotational capacity, but you're taking leg drive out of it.
So you're lying flat on your back. You're staying with your
Yep.
legs straight?
Yeah, flat on my back, legs straight,
Okay.
ball off right hip, take it up. I almost pull it to my chest, and then I dump it over to the other side.
Okay, so
So
you're
we're
almost
just
coming like
rotating.
up and down almost.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Mm.
up and over, but the heavier the ball, the better. I can even put on, like I use that for the hockey players a lot too, because a lot of hip issues. So the oblique and the adductor actually kind of blend together at the aponeurosis. And so if one of these are just too weak, we're going to kind of get an inadequate amount of tension. And so it's not going to hold my pelvis the way that I want. And so I'm going to end up arching and popping my hip through. And this is what gets hockey players in trouble, and they start getting like these sports hernias. Is just because they start lifting and then they get a shearing of that tissue, like it's just getting pulled apart. And that's what gets them into trouble. Same thing with being able to drive off hip extension, like from a takedown. If I can keep you in a better position and I can actually get the drive I want from like that oblique and everything else to hold my hip still, it's so much easier to drive through than it is if I have to kind of like squirm around to get the position I want.
Interesting. I'm gonna try that exercise. I like the sound of that. Is other just general kind of like rotation side bend stuff also going to address some of that, or is
In a way, like I mean, you can landmine. There's so much stuff we can do. Like we hit it from a different emphasis depending on where we're at, like out of camp, in camp, or what the training goal might be. So there's like times where like I want to almost remain as rigid as possible in my hips to really try and stress it from like the upper body standpoint from the thorax. And then there's other times where I'm like, just rotate it all in one go and just try and generate a shit ton of power. Right. So it's just whatever the training goal might be for that day.
Nice. That actually reminds me, you mentioned now, there's medicine balls with the ropes. They just slam against the walls. You standing against the wall. I remember that exercise back in the day, and you'd slam both sides. I could see that being similar if you're lying on your back on the floor too, if you want to do like that power version that you mentioned. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's almost like I haven't seen those in ages, man.
I know.
You think of it.
Bring them back. New trend.
Yeah. But like it's such a good way to learn to disassociate like hip and rib cage, just to maintain that level of like flexibility. That's why I'm a big fan of using kettlebell arm bars. And no warm-ups a lot of the time too, just to teach that disassociation between hip and rib and try and get that separation, but also stretch out that QL on the process too.
That's the one where you're lying with the kettlebell up and you're moving, basically window wipering your legs, right?
Yeah, your leg, like you roll your leg through, and then I teach like a little bit of a side crunch variation. So we'll take our leg all the way across, kind of stretch out that low back. You might even get a nice little back crack out of it. Yeah. And then we'll post that arm up and then almost like side crunch to recruit a little bit more oblique, and then roll through.
Okay, I like that. I like that one too. That's a cool little variation. Is there anything you obviously mentioned around the hips QL there? Is there anything like upper body wise, maybe MMA guys, strikers that you focus on, even at like the shoulder?
Shoulder, bicep, elbow. Like those are usually would get pretty jacked up. I mean, obviously hands. So like, making sure we're conditioning our hands, I think, is a big thing. And it's such an old school, like slept on technique. Like a lot of hockey guys do it, where like you're literally just sitting and you're just like lightly punching a granite countertop because you're just trying to remodel some of the bone. Like they're just making it as hard as humanly possible. And it's like some guys are dumb enough where they'll just like go bare knuckle on a heavy bag and just fuck their hands up. But I just tell them, I'm like, there's an easier way to do that with like some of the tempering stuff. And we can just repetitively, like on a hard surface, just do that lightly. And if you do it long enough, the bone, I mean, it's Wolff's Law, like the bone's going to remodel to lay a little bit thicker to protect us a little bit more. And especially on the outside, like with that pinky, because that's where we get our boxer's fracture at, like right there. Because if I catch it right on the outside and my hand curls, like that gets displaced. And so that's a good way to kind of cover our bases. Ideally, you never get into that position where you're throwing that shit of a punch, but like sometimes shit hits the fan, and that's just what we have to do to protect it.
Yeah. And then what are you doing? I mean, obviously, it probably depends on the person, but what are you doing generally around the shoulder, elbow, bicep?
I've been playing around a lot more with those like low threshold ISOs from like internal, external. I got some videos I can send over to you too.
Yeah.
I've been playing around a lot more with that stuff. I've been playing around a lot more of like sticking in ISO position and then just moving my body around, because that's really how the rotator cuff works. It's just meant to like hold your humeral head still while the rest of the arm and the body moves. And most people just do like the same banded external work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what's your take on those?
Post-op, I use it, but I'm very diligent in how I coach it. Like I got a story of a young baseball player. He had torn his labrum, went through like 6 months of PT, got cleared. He did all the isokinetic testing. Everything came back great. Numbers were equal side to side. Goes to throw a ball. Shoulder hurts all over again. He thinks he retore his labrum. So I get a call. I take a look at him. And then I put him in that same shoulder position that you would test for some of the isokinetics for the baseball players. And he's strong, like both sides equal. The only thing I asked him is, where do you feel this? And he goes, I feel it in my trap. I'm like, okay, so we're not really leveraging the back of our shoulder. So he just compensated his way through 6 months of physical therapy. So then every time I cue it, I always cue like, take your shoulder all the way back first, come back halfway. That's usually going to be like center of socket for most people. And so from a joint centration standpoint, that's usually the easiest because the length tension relationships are fairly balanced in that position. Doesn't mean you need to train like that all the time, but from a rehab standpoint, it's just an easy cue to give people. So I say, okay, find that center point. Now relax our shoulder, take it back to that center point, and then do your external rotation. And all of a sudden he's like, I just feel it right back here. It's like, perfect. Now you're actually working your rotator cuff and you're not compensating around it.
Gotcha. It's mentioned that's more for like that post-op rehab purpose.
Yeah, it's not going to give you enough load.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what's your take then on kind of isolating? Like a lot of people will think rotator cuff, they want to isolate it versus maybe more an integrated approach around the shoulder. Where do you sit in that?
I use both. Like if I'm isolating it, I'm taking it to failure. I think that's the other issue that people run into is they just go and it's like 3 sets of 10 with like the lightest band in the physical therapy building. And I'm like, that's not gonna do shit for you. And so like I will take it until like you're shaking and you fail. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now go in. Let's do a bottoms up kettlebell press. Let's see where you're at. Because now it's a true reflection. Now I put you in a fatigue state and we can actually drill this thing a lot more. But I think a lot of people just don't push the rotator cuff isolation work hard enough. It's just like a 3x10. And it's like, for me, we're going to take that thing to absolute failure. And I might even do some like manually super maximal eccentrics on top of it too. Like I'll be like, hold this position and I'm just going to jam you all the way back. At the end of that ISO, like for the football player that I was rehabbing up today, like all we did was just some like lateral hip work, just, traditional leg raise, just to hit a little bit of glute med. And I was like, take it for time. We're just going to make it fail. And so took it for about a minute and then that leg was shaking like crazy. And then all I did was just start adding some super maximal eccentrics and he had 3 reps on that and he was just fried. So you just have to send it. I think most people, they just kind of sandbag a lot of the rehab and then they jump into the lifting and they're like, I don't know why it's not working. Like the rehab sucked. And it's like, no, your effort sucked. And that's why it didn't stick.
Yeah, that's far too common than I think people would like to admit when we talk about rehab and what's usually prescribed.
Yeah.
And how potentially I don't know if it's just more on the like conservative side because maybe the physios or whatever don't want to risk re-injuring the athlete or not or whatnot, but it definitely happens.
Yeah, it's because they're stuck with a protocol. So usually you're working in a group setting and they're rotating like the physios a lot of the time. Like if you go to a group setting, so you're very rarely working with the same physio every single time. And what happens is you then get the same standard protocol that everybody else is doing there. And if you go outside of the protocol and you get better faster from that one physio, now it looks bad on the company because everybody's going to want to work with you. And that's what the company's designed for. But also if you go outside of protocol and you fuck them up, now you're liable. So the goal, so the intent is always just stay within the protocol, like slow and easy. But like the people I work with, like they're getting paid millions of dollars. Like we don't have time to dick around and wait 3 weeks and hope it gets better.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing with like team sports. Like a lot of people don't realize the staff, like from the medical side of things, like they pay to be the team doctor.
Yeah.
So you're getting not shit doctor. I mean, there's definitely some shit team doctors out there that I had to deal with. But like you'll look at some of the rehab plans they get and like, or some of like what the doctor's doing, or like, what is this? Like, this is the same thing I'd give a geriatric patient, not a pro athlete. Right. I remember there was a guy that got hurt earlier this year in the NHL and the team was like, all right, it's going to take like 4 weeks to get back on to playing. Right. We get a call. We look at him. I work with him for 3 days and he played on day 4.
Damn.
I'm like, this shit is not that hard. Just load it. And like, progress it from a tolerance standpoint, and then just tape it up and you're good. Like, it's not rocket science.
I hope they gave you a nice little bonus for that one.
No, because it's funny, because it's almost like I have to stay a ghost, because if they tell the team that they work with me, then it looks really bad from the organizational standpoint. But a lot of guys have somebody they go with to work with behind the scenes.
Yeah. That's a very American sports thing too, because around the world you don't see
No,
that.
it's so funny enough. So the guy from we were talking about within Super Rugby, I had a call with another athlete, and pretty much they were about to go do a lift, and he was like, "What do you think of this lift? Is there anything I need to do or like don't need to do, or I can just tell the strength coach like I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do my own thing." And then the rugby player looked at me and he was like, "Are you fucking serious?" He was like, "If I told a coach like I'm not doing any of this shit, I'd be like sent off. There's no chance of me coming back to this team." And I was like, yes, this is the very American way of how sports are handled. Everybody has their outside guy and they do all this shit. Now I'm all for like collaboration. So I'm always tell the athlete, I'm like, hey, like put me in contact with the strength coach, go do vast majority of this shit anyway. And if something pops up, like just tell them like that this doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
I think people get like a big ego about it. And they're like, I want to be the guy that's like the man behind the scenes. And I'm like, I don't really give a shit. Like I like being a ghost.
Yeah. Nice. I saw you've been posting some neurovisual stuff recently, and that's piqued my interest for a while now. I've had Dan Fichter on the podcast talking some of the neuro stuff. I've had Sean Sherman from Square One talking stuff on here. So it'd be interesting to kind of go into your take and your uses of it, or maybe even just what the hell it even is to begin with.
Yeah, so I got into neurovisual stuff at like the tail end of my playing career, because I racked up so many concussions that the game had moved so fast that I just couldn't keep up from like a perceptual standpoint. Like I go back and watch film and I'd make a shitty pass and I'd be like, well, why did I do that? Because the guy's 6 meters away and I'm thinking he's only a meter in front of me. And so I'm like, something's off here. And then I get full-time working, and we had this one where the clinic was set up. I'd have to round the corner on my left-hand side to go to the front desk. And every single time I would clip my shoulder off of that side of the wall. And it just became like a running joke that like, me and that wall had beef. And I didn't know.
You just got too big. You just got wide, bro.
And the issue is that I had essentially midline shift. Like my vision had gone from here to here. So I never perceived that the wall was as close as it was on my left-hand side, just because I didn't realize it was there from a visual standpoint. And then I had a patient that actually was a neuro-optometrist. I never even heard of those. And so I went and got an eval, and they're like, hey, your eyes are pretty fucked up. So I was like, all right, let's dive into this stuff a little bit more. And it became a fascinating thing because I work with a lot of athletes for concussions. That's kind of my specialty. And it just became a fascinating piece. And then I started to integrate it more and more. And I'm like, oh, wow, this actually has downstream effects with like shoulder complaints or neck complaints, or like how a hip moves, or just weird stuff like that like Square One guys are like noticing, or that or Fichter like has talked about in the past with some of these things. Like, cause he loves to give that example of like making Louis march, and like it cleans up a lot of the movement. So it just became such a fascinating thing for me. And then I just realized like it's all kind of connected. Right? You can't isolate any systems within a body. Like they all kind of feed off of each other. And that's what made me really dive down that rabbit hole. So with the neurovisual training, like you're training your eyes, but your eyes are just an output of the brain. And then your brain ultimately has to communicate with the vestibular system, which is like inner ear, and then some of the joint receptors within obviously the joints that kind of give feedback, but then also like some of the receptors in your neck. And so there's just so much overlap with things. And then it just became such a fascinating tool. And you can even apply it to your training that you do a lot of time, which Fichter has like done extremely well. So it's one of my favorite tools to go to, like to kind of eval an athlete, because a lot of people realize that they're not good at some of these drills. And it's like, these are just hidden gains that are on the table. Like imagine if we clean this up, how much easier the game would be for you.
So where can people start if they listen to this? Like, okay, well, they want to train their eyes or evaluate their eyes, or whatever it is. What's the first thing that someone could do on their own at home? And I guess how can they decide whether it's an issue or not?
So easiest way to kind of determine whether it's not actually an issue, and everybody kind of has like some issues to some degree. It's just how big of an issue it is. I'll do positional stuff. So like cardinal fields of gaze, I'll just take my thumb and I'll go up and try and hold it. and I'll just take it in like peripheries and like different angles and see like how uncomfortable is this on my eyes. Right. So now I know, okay, my eyes don't really want to pull to that way. I can start to work that. I can also test like going up and down, like looking at like from a eye tracking standpoint, like you can record yourself going side to side, like do my eyes do one of these and jump back. Like same thing with tracking on the angles. You can also do convergence, so tracking in, stuff like that. Like, do you see one finger the whole time or does it split into two? When does it get blurry? Stuff like that. Those are some pretty good evaluations on yourself that you could do. Otherwise, find a neurooptometrist or find someone that's trained in neurovisual training, which I feel like is very few and far in between. So it's kind of hard to find somebody like that, because I think we only have 2, maybe 3, like decent neurooptometrists in all of like Columbus, Ohio. So it's really hard to find somebody. And then like even like me as a chiropractor doing neurovisual training is also like extremely rare. So it's like most of the people you're going to find are either like neurooptometrists that are doing a lot of this stuff because they even have the tech to be able to do so, because the shit is super expensive when you really dive down the rabbit hole. But then coming in wise, there's so many tests that we can do. Oh, another little test from a vestibular function is just start squared up on something, close your eyes, slowly spin in a circle, stop where you think you started. So do it clockwise, take note of where you're at, do it counterclockwise, see if you're off kilter when you finish. And then you can even test, you can bias like certain canals within the ear. So you can kind of tilt your head one way and then spin, tilt your head the other way, and then spin to kind of isolate out some of these canals a little bit better. Yeah, it's a never ending rabbit hole of stuff.
Okay, so say someone does this little eye tracking stuff and the eyes don't move smoothly. It does like that little jump that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What's the next step for someone to do? And then when you say clean it up, what does that mean? Does that mean like you do something and then suddenly you're good for a while, or do you have to keep doing this stuff?
It usually takes a bit of time like to continually build upon this stuff. But I think the residual for most people I've seen has been like 3 to 4 months at a time. Like it's pretty good. Because there's even like software I'll use to track some of this stuff. Like there's apps on your phone where you can like track a lot of these things now. But usually it's like limited to the practitioners. So it's really hard to just like buy it for yourself and then interpret the results. But cleaning up wise, it's just like, okay, I know I suck doing a certain drill. Let me find out why I suck at this drill. And then, okay, here's how I train it up. Honestly, one of the easiest ways to do so is just use an eye patch and just sit outside and look at the world for 2 to 5 minutes at a time, and then flip the eye patch. It's like one of the easiest things to do because that's just basic homework I give everybody. And then from there, we'll do like some search and scan drills. Like I have a piece of paper. I'll send it over to you. I have like a piece of paper that I made, and it's got a bunch of numbers on the piece of paper, and it's got my logo in the background, kind of like on a grayscale. And so some of the numbers are like black on white, and those are really easy to pick out from a contrast perspective. Some of the other numbers are like black on gray, so it's flush on my logo, and some are half on, half off. And the numbers are all jumbled up all over the piece of paper. And so I tell people, cover one eye, just tap 1 through 30. And so it's a really good drill to see how good are you at picking out things against contrast. What does your search and scan drill kind of like look like? How does your search pattern go? And then what's our eye fatigue do? Because like blinking your eye repeatedly is a sign of like mental fatigue. Like we see that all the time, especially like when you're really tired. If you ever had a long drive, like late at night, you're always kind of like closing your eyes and like doing one of those. So it's a really good way to kind of see like, okay, this is something I definitely need to train up because I'm blinking like crazy and it's taking me 30 seconds longer to get through this eye compared to the other eye.
Interesting. So the eye patch thing, you would do that daily?
Yep, just daily. Because again, like we tend to bias a lot of things with our eyes. Like we're always going to compensate for the thing that's better. And so your visual acuity might be really good out of this eye. And so the visual acuity might not be as great from the other eye. And so your brain just goes, I trust this one a little bit more from the processing standpoint. So you naturally become very reliant upon this eye, and now this eye not as much. And it just creates discrepancies over time. And so I'm trying to bridge the gap between those two and almost get them level would be like the ideal from that situation.
So what could someone potentially expect? Say they started doing this daily, like what would they potentially notice?
Increased peripheral vision is a big thing. Clarity within the vision a lot more. Sensitivity to like things moving. You can pick it up a lot easier. I got a story from like one of my SWAT guys I work with. They had a hostage situation. He was third man in. So they had breach, and then they went through flashbang, went into the room. One guy had far right corner, another guy was dead center. There was the perp was in the back left corner, and the first two guys that went through did not see him because the room was so dark, and so they didn't see him. My guy came through, and he goes, "I just saw like the faintest glimmer of light," and it's because when he pulled out his gun to shoot, like he could see, he recognized that quick change of light, and so he neutralized the threat and then saved the other two guys' lives in that situation. So I'm like, "How valuable is it?" And he was like, "This shit's fucking awesome."
The most valuable.
Yeah. So yeah, it's such a cool underrated thing that like most people just don't think about, because it's like you always think like, okay, I can go train in the gym, like I'll train my muscles or I'll train like my lungs, my cardio, my heart. It's like you never really think to train your eyes.
Yeah, and it also from anyone who's like in a pure say strength conditioning sense or performance sense, it sounds woo woo.
Yeah,
It sounds like it's just made up shit.
yeah. And there is like some people that like take it a bit far and they're kind of full of shit with some of their stuff they're saying online. Cause I'll watch these videos and I'm like, that's not the actual pathway to the brain, or like that's not how that thing actually works. But like whatever, they can say whatever the fuck they want.
So
But like I've seen people do shitty vision training and put people in a hole though too. So like you have to be careful with some of that stuff, because
so what,
people,
what counts as shitty vision training?
everybody gets spammed with the same like, let's do a bunch of pencil push-ups. That's one
Yeah.
of the last drills that I ever use for people, because it's reliant heavily upon convergence, and not everybody has great convergence, but you also need, call it binocular vision. So each eye needs to be able to see it accordingly. And if you do this test and you do it right, it should get blurry, and then your fingers should almost split in, it should split into two a little bit.
Mm,
And that's because as you get this close, your eyes can't fuse the image. So
yeah.
this eye sees across, this eye sees across, so I see double. We call it a physiologic diplopia. And that's a normal thing. That's what should happen. If you don't get that, that means you're just shutting off the image from one eye, because your brain goes, I don't trust that image as nearly as much. It's not as clear. And so you just compensate and bury it into this eye. And so if I just do that over and over and over and over again, like all I'm doing is just digging myself a deeper hole, because now I'm over reliant upon this eye.
Interesting. And then, do you implement any of these vision things into the actual like your typical strength training stuff? I know Dan Fick just talked about. I think even Sean Sherman talked about like doing some kind of eye movement or head movement, like doing lunges with your head one way or something like that to see if it's a threat, and then
Yeah.
doing certain exercises. So are you incorporating this within exercise itself too?
That's more of like a rehab thing for me. Like I
Okay.
won't do that as we load it up, because I feel like you're just kind of half-assing two things. Like I'd rather just get really fucking strong in that position and then just use the head positioning stuff maybe as the warm-up to go into that drill.
Okay. Yeah.
And so within that, like it makes sense, because it got, obviously as I turn my head, like I'm changing the vestibular input. And so like, do I feel as comfortable on that side? And so there is things that you can kind of train up from a head position, from an eye position standpoint. Like you can put anybody in a position to create a threat for the most part. So I will use some of that, but I'm very, very big on trying to reduce the amount of suppression that somebody gets in a state of fatigue. And so we might do that search and scan drill after a set of bench press or after a bit of cardio, because it's going to go to shit. Joe Clark, Dr. Clark, who I did a fair bit of my learning from with all the neurovisual training. So he's a PhD in neuroscience at the University of Cincinnati. And he implemented vision training for all their student athletes. And especially within the case of football, like he took the concussion rate from 9.2, I think it was averaged across 100 seasons or something, down to 2, just from the neurovisual training, nothing else added into the program. And it's just a fascinating thing for me. I'm like, okay, we can clear a lot of this stuff up, but it really just makes a big difference under fatigue, right? Because people tend to get, knocked out later in the rounds when they're very tired. And you can go into like looking at, I don't know if you're familiar with like FNIRS, with the functional near infrared spectroscopy,
Somewhat.
where they're looking at it from like a cerebral oxygenation standpoint. Like once you kind of hit past like come up on VT2, like cerebral oxygenation starts to drop. And so decision making goes down, but also your vision changes. Like your vision actually closes in. Anyone who's ever had a very heavy set of bench has been like, I'm almost blacked the fuck out, because the walls close in after you get it. And it's because your blood pressure and your heart rate go through the roof. And that sets off, it's called a Turk murmur. So it's a transient exercise related carotid murmur. And so I'll test this with all the athletes that I work with, because this is all based off of Joe Clark concussion work. We'll put them on a spin bike, and I'll just put a stethoscope and listen to their carotid artery. And so they'll pedal for a bit, get their heart rate up, track it. I'll be like, okay, take a deep breath, hold, and I'll listen. And if I'm hearing a whoosh sound or if it's just regular, if I hear a whoosh, then I know the blood flow is getting turbulent. It's creating a murmur. And now that blood flow getting up to the brain is turbulent. And so with that turbulence, blood flow to the brain, your brain's not going to like that. It's going to start to shut down certain processes. Like it might shut off, it might suppress an eye. It might change how you handle things from a vestibular standpoint. You might get a little bit of ringing in the ears. Like there's little tells that can happen. And so our goal is to kind of evaluate where that torque murmur is at, see if we can raise the ceiling on it. Because it also is a good indicator for brain health. I like testing that post-fight for a lot of the athletes too. Because a lot of that kind of goes in line with like the Buffalo treadmill test for concussion. Like I'm personally not a big fan of it because when you're concussed, your vestibular system's pretty fucked up. And if I'm jogging on a treadmill, my head's like this. That's like an easy way to set off all the symptoms. If I'm on a spin bike, everything is stationary. So I kind of eliminate that variable.
Before I go down the road of this concussion stuff, so you could do in between the sets of your strength work, you could do like as you mentioned, your eye tracking like peripherally with your thumb as an eye exercise as an example.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do the search and scan on the paper stuff. You could do near far, like accommodation. Like I'll have like a piece of paper with whatever letters, numbers on it, and then I'll have another one in the distance. And we'll go here, like read. You could do saccades where you go catch the edges side to side, which like people do with this all the time. Or you can just read straight across, and then you look up, and then you catch something in the distance. And that really measures like your ability for your lens to change shape to accommodate light in distance. And so that's like a very easy thing. Like if I go from clinch to now disengage, can my eyes change from being right here to, okay, take in space where their shoulder's at, make sure I don't get clipped with a hook.
So would you say that would be probably the easiest implementation would be to just almost superset it with some of the main work?
Yeah, after they've done it from a fresh state. So we'll usually spend like a couple of weeks drilling it. So they get one, familiar with the drills, two, they actually just get better in a fresh state. And then we'll add in like a layer of fatigue. And you could do it from a fatigue standpoint. You could do it from a mental standpoint as well. Like I'll have people go through and do a drill, and then I might start giving them like math equations or like asking them about like shit they have to think about from the day before or things like that to really distract, because now I'm just adding a bit of sensory overload to all this. And you can really find a breaking point with an athlete. We've done that a handful of times where it's like you almost bring someone to tears because they get so fucking frustrated. They just can't take it because you get so overwhelmed and you start to get actually like very pissy, and then they just shut down. And it's like, all right, perfect. Like I know where our breaking point is.
So then in terms of that would be like overloading, say, the visual aspect. You obviously mentioned the vestibular with the ears. Are you doing anything with that, say like supersetting things or anything?
With the vestibular stuff, a little bit. It's a little bit harder to superset that in the gym just because the system's already going like haywire, and I don't just want to be like, move your head real quick, and then you're already kind of like out of it, and now I'm like making your head move, and you're just like, fuck. And then I'll just come back. So that one I'm a little bit like not as much. I like it from a warm-up standpoint. Like I'll put somebody on like those big Swiss balls or the physio ball on their back, and I'll literally just give them, I'll put something like in a corner, or I'll stand in a back corner, like at an angle from them, and somebody else is on the other side, and they'll go back to bias like a certain canal if they're weaker on that side or if there's a bit of a discrepancy, and I'll flash a number. So like then they have to call it out, and then they sit back up, and then they stare like straight ahead, and then we go back, whether it's another way or if it's from a true rehab standpoint, we'll stay the same side until I can kind of balance out the equilibrium. But if it's just from a general training side, like we might flip back and forth with some of these things. And so that's another easy way to train vestibular work within a controlled environment.
Nice. Do you have any other stuff detailed somewhere?
All in my head, man.
Man, you need to create some resources.
It's so bad, dude. I hear that at least like 5 times a day. I'll get a call from somebody because I'll consult with them, or I got buddies that are coaches, and they'll be like, hey, what do you do for this, this, and this? And I'm like, oh, it's just easy. It's this, this, and this. Where do you read that from? I'm like, oh, it's just stored in my head.
Nice. For the concussion side, do you want to maybe run? I don't want to say give. Okay, general guidelines. Yeah. So like, because obviously people are going to see. Hopefully, people are going to see professionals after whatever happens. Depending, obviously, on I mean, some fighters are cowboys and will
Yeah.
do whatever, but just general guidelines. Okay, someone potentially suffers from a concussion, or maybe they don't even know from a fight, because I guess some of them maybe uh, have some TBI, but they didn't actually get
Yes.
knocked out. So maybe just where to start from directly after a fight. What can someone do to potentially help recover faster and not make symptoms worse, etc.
For me, it's like get off electronics, like is usually one of the easiest things. And it's not because like the light is going to fuck with your eyes or anything like that. It's the convergence. We call it near point convergence stress. So like right now we're sitting in front of a computer and the computer is fairly close to us. So our eyes have to narrow in, which is the equivalent of like doing this pencil push up, but it has to hold it for a long period of time, whether you're staring at your phone, your laptop, or like whatever. And so that's extremely hard for your brain to do and hold it consistently. Like that's a skill and that's very taxing. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like if you've been on your laptop or you've been on your phone for like hours at a time, like you'll feel the fatigue in your eyes and your brain a little bit. So I'm very big, like get off of screens, spend time outside, like don't wear sunglasses. A lot of athletes just have very bad light sensitivity. And it's usually like, post concussion, they start wearing sunglasses and they're like, oh, this helps a bunch. And then they just stay wearing sunglasses. But the problem is like we didn't actually fix the problem. Like we just masked it. So I'm very big on getting outside, not wearing sunglasses because I want the light to enter your eyes. I want you to desensitize that. Obviously, don't stare at the fucking sun, but I might say face the other way from the sun and just look like that. Look out there. If that's still too bright, I might say like just close your eyelids because your eyelids will filter the sunlight, but you'll still get a little bit of that light. And then if it's still like really bad, you can kind of leave your fingers open like this because it's still going to block some of that light. So I'm very, very big on that stuff. And that decreases a lot of the light sensitivity. Like I used to wear sunglasses all the time, like even indoors, because I just had really bad light sensitivity until I said, fuck it. Like I'm just going to get this fixed. And no, I haven't had any issues. I don't really have to wear sunglasses. I do recommend it like if you're on water or if you're on a boat or if you're on snow. And it's just because the light reflects down and then comes back up. Like there's nothing you can do to prevent that. So I'm very, very big on a lot of that stuff. Spending time outside, like everybody's really caught up on red light devices. Like the cheapest red light device out there is the sun. Like you're going to get the near infrared light from it. Like it's going to help you heal. So spend as much time out in the sun as humanly possible. Even if you're in the shade, you still get the benefit of the near infrared light. You also get the UV, so the vitamin D, right? So that helps a whole bunch too. I'm real big on that. And then you can use colored lenses, like whether it's, and they're really cheap on Amazon. You can buy different ones, whether it's like yellow, green, purple, if you're got a really, if you got your bell rung pretty good. Because that's another way to not fully wear sunglasses, but at least have some colored like lenses to block out some of the wavelengths that might trigger the headaches. So I'm big on a lot of that stuff. I'm big on reducing carbohydrate intake. Don't have to go full keto. I mean, they make drinks now where you can put you in ketosis a hell of a lot faster. Like there's different ketones that you can use, whether it's like a Go BHB, 1,3-butane-diol, Tecton's got their own stuff. So I'm big on using ketones like as a way to get fuel to the brain because you just might not be able to utilize glucose nearly as efficiently after brain trauma. So I'm very big on that, just reducing the carbohydrate intake for a little bit, and then we kind of gradually build it back up. So those are some easy things to do.
I've got 3 questions
Yeah.
that are all over the place for this. I'm going to start because one goes back to neurovisual stuff too, because you reminded me of it. But first, let's start with the concussion stuff. The current trend of high dosing creatine for concussions. What's your take?
It's a good way to shit yourself. I mean, it just causes GI distress, but if you look at a lot of the data, I mean, I'm not saying like it doesn't work. Like it works, just not nearly as well as what people think. It's way overhyped. Because when you look at the data, it was done on like Alzheimer's patients, or it was done with somebody that had already had neurodegenerative diseases or had cognitive impairments. It didn't work on healthy controls. It didn't really change much. Plus, when you take in creatine, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier that easily. So like the amount that you're taking, you're getting minuscule amounts across. And so you're just really burning through a shit ton of creatine to not really get the full benefit of it. Like if you want to take a whole bunch of it, like be my guest. I haven't seen anything like anecdotally where it made a massive difference with any of the athletes that I worked with. I mean, I've done it to myself too. Like it's great. I mean, there's research on it for sleep deprivation. Like I have a 3-month-old. Like I live in sleep deprivation.
Dude, tell
And
me about it.
so
2 under 3, and they're both not sleeping.
oh, it's fucking brutal. Mine finally got her first like sickness. She's got like a little bit of a
Oh,
fever and a cold.
yeah.
And so none of us are sleeping. I'm running like I would say 137 my time. I'm already a gram of caffeine in. Like we're just full send today. We just got to power through. And so it's but yeah, a lot of that stuff just it doesn't really pan out when you look at it from a healthy person standpoint.
Okay. My next one. For the neuro trainings, you mentioned the different color glasses, strobe glasses. I'm sure you're
Yep.
aware of them. What's your take on them for visual training?
Early on, I was like, these are dumb. And then it kind of clicked for me. So there's a big argument within the realm of teaching philosophies around skill acquisition of near versus far training, like how much of what we do actually transfers to what we're training for. And a lot of people argue and say like the vision training you're doing is not going to specifically transfer to the sport of what they're doing. It might not. Never bad to err on the side of that it is. But a way for near training is strobe glasses when you're doing like touch sparring. Obviously, like don't put them on and go full go and get your shit rocked. But it's a good way to speed up process like your perceptual awareness because now you're just getting. We do this with tachistoscopes where I like give you an image on a screen and I take it away real quick and I say, tell me everything that you saw in the image, and I might embed like a word or a specific jersey or other things that I'm hoping you pick out. And so you have to get very quick at like reading, analyzing the situation, and then giving back the information of what you saw, right? Theoretically, you could do the same thing with Snaptech is like the big company that runs those goggles. And so they have like the shutter where it drops off and on real quick. And I think that's actually a great way to do it. I think most people are just too afraid to do it. And I don't blame them because it is very risky to do. I think if you do just some like light touch sparring, I think you might be like okay with it. Obviously, like can't go full go, but it's a good way to then get into like predictive processing of like, okay, I see this move. I go blank real quick. Where do I think it's going to be next? Because we do that when we evaluate athletes in like baseball or football or anything else. Like they go through the same testing. They go through it, they cut the screen off and they say, okay, where's this ball going to end up? And so now we can see like who's going to predict where this thing's going to go because now I know they're very good at what they do. We call it coincidence anticipation timing, or CAT. And a CAT is just a combination of dynamic visual acuity, so your ability to track something that's moving, right, and how clear it is, and then also contrast sensitivity. Like, can you pick out the subtle shades of what's going on? Because it's also going to give you an idea of how far away from a background it might be. So I can combine those two things. I can predict exactly where something's going to be. And at the highest levels, it's all just pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Everybody's the same athletically for the most part at the highest level. It's all just who can recognize the pattern the fastest and act upon it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is part of agility development there anyway. So you've got
just OODA loops.
Yeah. And then the third one on what you're saying is you mentioned obviously red light with the infrared light. Obviously, there's like a billion red light companies now that will obviously exaggerate maybe the effects and the science around it. But I'll be interested to hear your take on red light, what it may be useful for.
I mean, I think it's good. It's good and bad. If you've had like a history of brain trauma, it can actually set off symptoms and make it worse. Like I've had a handful of consults I've done where people are like, yeah, I did the red light and it sent me back like months. Couldn't even get out of bed for like a few weeks at a time. So that's not gonna be the response for a lot of people. Usually if you overdo red light, you just feel lethargic, which I tell people if you're gonna do it, just do it at night because you're gonna go to bed anyway. Phenomenal for wound healing. Definitely some benefit from even blood sugar metabolism, right? Like we've studied this where if you eat under red light, your blood sugar response is drastically lower than if you were to eat under blue light because blue light's inherently stimulating. So if I have athletes where they're on and this is like getting like biohacky at this point, but like guys have millions of dollars, who gives a shit? They're willing to throw it around at whatever and get whatever little edge that they can. I'll be like, just if you're gonna go home and eat, like when you come home from a game, like just have the red light shining on you. because that's going to inherently drop that glucose response. And so that's also downstream going to, because spiking our glucose at night is not necessarily great for tendons either, because that's when they tend to cycle over. And so we'll see like very poor tendon health with chronically high HbA1c or like blood glucose or insulin levels. So that's why I'm always like very hesitant to just spam high carb diets all the time with athletes, because unless you're actually getting your labs done regularly, which hardly anybody is, like you don't actually know where you're sitting at, and that could impact your healing abilities. So, but yeah, like overall, I'm a big fan of red light. Like, I mean, I use it. Do you need to go buy one? Like, no, just go sit outside. You'll get the effect. If you need a concentrated dose of it, yes, like you can go get a red light and spend like a couple $100. I'd rather you just get like a UV light, because then you get the vitamin D from it. And like, there's companies that make UV red light combos, like EMR Tech has one. But the other thing is like when you buy a red light device, you need to know what the power density is. So like what the wattage is, what's the irradiance distance and all that stuff. Because like people will buy stuff and then they'll set it and they'll sit like a foot away from it, and it's only rated for 3 inches. And so you're getting absolutely nothing out of this, because with light, it works off an inverse square law. So for like every little bit that you move back, it drops more and more and more. So where you get now no biologic effect from it, and it's useless.
Perfect. And then I wanted to touch on, you had a post recently on your Instagram about Nordics, the old Nordic curl that everyone loves. So I guess it was always popular, but then it obviously got more popular, I think, with knees over toes, kind of pushing it even harder for knee health. And then obviously in the sporting world, it's popular because it's just an assessment people use with a Nord board, and they've created a whole metric around it. So it'd be interesting to kind of go into your take around Nordics. With, you know, are they useful for anything? And then maybe just your take on them generally.
Like I still use, I guess you could call it a Nordic, but it's not really, like, because I always keep foot contact against the wall, because I want some level of calf contribution. Because usually if you've played sport long enough, your knees are kind of fucked up. And so the last thing I want is someone just pinning down like your tibia and fibula, and then your femur just like wrenching, and your knees usually like can feel like shit after a lot of like Nordic work. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Like I've had that plenty of times. So I'm very big on integrating like the calf, because you also get better pelvic control. Because what I tell people is like push in and pull up. So you're going to get a little bit better of a hamstring contraction out of that. I'll have them walk themselves out like on a physio ball or med ball, and so we can do it from like a kind of controlled manner. As far as the testing, honestly, man, I think it's pretty useless. I've had athletes with like 30% discrepancy and be totally fine, and then I've had athletes that are at like 2% discrepancy and pop a hammy, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And I think it just reinforces shitty sprinting mechanics. I mean, the drill itself doesn't, but like when you execute that drill, everyone's fighting to not fall. So what are they doing? Like they're just popping their chest up, they're dumping their pelvis. Like all these things that you would never do when you sprint. And they're supposed to be like, oh, here's a good way to make sure that we're not going to get injured when we sprint. So it's just a shitty mechanic overall to train that. And there's just so many better ways like I can look to train a hamstring. But I had a call with Mal McHugh, who was the sports scientist for the New York Rangers and does a lot of the stuff for the NHL Combine. And we got into like the whole concept of testing, because they're big on using the groin squeeze test, right? The force frame. And what they found is that it wasn't really all that great of information. And because a lot of the guys, all it did was piss off their groin, so they didn't take it seriously. And then if you did manage to have a groin injury, even if you wanted to push as hard as you could, your body like will not let you do it, because if we have an equal and an opposite reaction on the other side. So if this side is going to cause me pain and I push really hard here, it's going to cause more pain here. So I'm just going to naturally down regulate the amount of force I put on the other side. So it's not a true reading. And then as far as that, he put a really good point. He goes, we're so fixated on the metric of, you know, it needs to be within 10%. And I'm always sketched out about numbers, whether they're a 5 or if they end in a 5 or a 0, because we usually just pulled it out of our ass. Like numbers never work that perfectly. And so when they're like, oh, it needs to be at 10%, it's like, what happens if it's at 11%? Like, is that big of a deal? And also, theoretically, if I wanted something to be 10%, if I just stopped training my good leg, it would get weaker and then get within that 10%. Is that athlete going to be safer? Probably not.
Yeah. It's it's a funny one because it's I guess it's like it's easily accessible eccentric overload for the
Yeah,
hamstrings, which is probably why it's somewhat so popular. It's part of like FIFA 11 warm ups,
yeah,
because for that reason. But then at the same time, like you're training short to maybe like middle length eccentric overloads. You're never really getting that long muscle length in
yeah,
there, and then it's isolated, so it's never integrated into the other movements. So it's kind of like
yeah,
maybe for like a structural architectural change, sure, but you could get that in a billion other ways that may
yeah.
be, I guess, more integrated and more applicable to I don't know, someone's sport or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and if I want to really train somebody like in a lengthened position, like I'll just take a band or take a lightweight, wrap it around their ankle, and then put them almost in a nearly straightened leg position, like from a prone, and just drop their
Mm,
leg off the bench and just say, okay, we're going to hold this for time. It might take it 2, 3 minutes.
mm.
Like that's going to remodel that tissue way better than that Nordic will for about the half a second that you're falling, and then you lose control.
Yeah, it's usually like the first intro to motion is the tension, and the rest is
Yeah,
kind of just letting go.
the rest is just a belly flop. Yeah, and then they turn it into a razor curl when they come back, and I'm like, it's not really what I was looking for, but thanks.
What's your take then on I guess other what I guess they would call them like injury prevention, quote unquote exercises. Like people do Copenhagen planks for groin and stuff like that. Oh, do these fit anywhere into your training philosophy or rehab philosophy?
Yeah, I use them like within a warm up.
Yeah,
Like I'm big on Copenhagen's. I don't teach it from the ankle though, just because a lot of the guys I work with, the knees are jacked. So we actually just
yeah,
put the knee on a med ball, and that creates a little bit of instability. And so they actually have to then almost work harder to maintain that positioning. But I also think like we just can't ISO mid range or like one position too much. Like you still have to train that full spectrum of things.
yeah.
So there's almost a thing I do. It's like a plate slide. It almost looks like a foot sweep. So we'll hinge back on one leg, put like a 25 or 45-pound plate out in front of us, and then use the other leg, like the inside of the foot, to sweep that plate all the way across, and then just try and stay like in a good hinge on that one leg.
Oh,
So
that sounds good.
I've used that like a fair bit to train some of the other lengthened positions. What's really interesting though, with a lot of the groin stuff within hockey, it's the lengthened position that usually tears people's hips up because they're also losing rib cage position. So they're
Mm,
getting the oblique pulling up, adductor pulling down, and then they get into danger. And that's usually what causes like whether it's the sports hernia, the adductor tear, like whatever might be going on. Same thing with the kicking mechanic. Like they bring their leg all the way back, their chest is popped up, like that's exactly how it goes. And so I use I'll find like a bench or like a heightened table, and we'll put our forearms on it to kind of plank, and then I'll put their foot on a slider, and
mhm.
we'll let that foot kind of go out, but they have to actively drive down in a plank to keep the rib cage down and then bring that
Yeah.
foot back in. And it's absolutely smokes people. It's super hard to do. Um, but that's another way like I'll train that groin. But as far as like injury prevention stuff, this is also a very interesting fact. I was talking about it with one of the athletes yesterday. With injury prevention, like people get very pissed off at that term. There's no way that we can prevent injury. But from an epidemiological definition, it's actually correct. But from a colloquial standpoint, it's actually incorrect. And this is where it like
Mhm.
fucks with people's heads. So if you like, for instance, we say prevent the flu, wash your hands, right? You can still get the flu even if you wash your hands. But if less people got the flu because they washed their hands, then they technically prevented the flu.
Mm,
Right. So that's where like the terminology comes from. It doesn't mean everybody like didn't get the flu, but if less people got it, then it's fine. Then we technically prevented it for this subset of people. But for some reason, like strength coaches love to be all or none. Like if it didn't prevent the injury for, 100% of the people, then it's not an injury prevention program. Now, the terminology I could give two shits about, but I just think like that's an interesting point that I see debated like every few months. Like so many people be in an argument over that on social media.
yeah. People arguing over everything on social media. It's the world today.
I know it's crazy to me.
Dylan, this was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Where can people find and follow you? Keep up with what you're doing because you're still a ghost, but you're becoming less of a ghost, I think.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how long the posting will go for. Easiest way to get a hold of me, like I guess, is through like Instagram. Even though sometimes I'm not posting, like I'll shit post on the story a handful of times. So I'm always throwing some good memes up there. But I'm pretty active, like just shooting the shit with people on that stuff. Find me through my website. Like I'll do consults with people all the time, like email that's on there. It's another good way too. But yeah, it's just, I cover so like wide a variety of things that like you're just going to get so many interesting approaches. Like we just probably skimmed like 3% of like what I actually do. And it's such a crazy rabbit hole to go down once you start throwing in like circadian rhythm and then some of the supplements. And then we review the blood labs. Like I had that with that MS patient today, like going through all these blood labs, and the doctor's like, oh, this is normal. I'm like, actually, like you're very borderline macrocytic anemic here. I was like, if we don't, and I was like, I bet you snore, looking at the MCV that he had on his things. And he was like, how did you know that? I'm like, I could tell because I can look at the size of your red blood vessel or your red blood cell and can pick up that you have sleep apnea. Damn, so just crazy shit like that.
Maybe we have to do it. Maybe we have to do a round 2. Maybe we have to do a round 2 on this stuff. But I'll link up everything in the description for anyone who wants to go into it. And I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, of course, man. Appreciate you having me out.